actionable data insights, and how to harness CX or customer experience data, analytics for actionable insights which drive bottom line results. So I have a big panel today. We have, I'll just try to go in the order they are on my screen. Going around, we have Afshin Angar. He's Vice President of Strategic Custom Insights and Advanced Analytics with AT&T. Raise your hand and say hello. You here? Let's hear your volume. You on?
I'm here. Yeah. Nice to be with you, John.
He is here. Okay, real quick. Tell the audience something about you that they don't know. They don't know anything about you. Say something interesting.
Something interesting about me. Does it have to be personal or can it be professional?
It's up to you.
I'm also on the edge of Tornado Alley like you are. I'm not expecting something at 3 o'clock, but I'm actually next to a tornado warning system. It's right next to my house. So nobody knows faster than I do when we're about to get one. So I empathize with you, John.
Thank you. I accept empathy and sympathy. I like both of them. John Ross, and I'm going in order here, is the Global Director of Customer Partnerships, former with PepsiCo. So he was with a big cola company that has lots of conglomerates and other companies too. John Ross, tell the audience hello and give us something interesting about yourself that's I should have said this earlier, Afshin, that's not like related to business or data or customer experience. Something like a little cool that people can learn about you real quick.
Gotcha. Say, hey, good morning, good afternoon. I'm in New Orleans. I'm just south of you all. I'm also in the tornado belt today. But the most interesting thing I can tell you about myself is I'm a descendant of Blackbeard the pirate.
Oh, wow. Can we just take this whole thing a whole nother direction? No, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, tally ho, my friend.
There you go.
Ashley Fitzgerald is the Senior Director, Data Science and Analytics with Appnovation. I believe they are one of our sponsors, so thank you for doing that as well. Ashley, a little bit about you other than your data background and your professional background.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for having me. The tornadoes actually floated over my house last night to get to you in Louisiana. I'm based right outside of Austin, Texas. So I thought the wind was going to blow the roof off my house all night last night. So we survived. So happy to be here. And then something exciting about my personal life is I just started my first vegetable garden over the weekend. So it is my first soiree. So if anybody has any gardening tips, I will welcome them. And I will share some data tips to be mutually beneficial.
That's awesome. So we have a weatherman, a pirate, and a gardener to get started today. So this looks like a perfect expert panel to get going. So yeah, so all the joshing aside, let's jump in here. And I'll start. I guess I got a question here. John Ross, I can start with you, and then we'll just kind of hop around so we don't interrupt each other. Talk a little bit about how you learn about core customer insights to impact your campaigns or what you're trying to do. Campaigns is an overarching theme for what you're doing, so don't think of it as a technical campaign, but like maybe your initiative. What's your way of reaching your core customer and learning who they are?
Yeah, I think we would start with the offline behaviors of consumers in store. And what we did during COVID from a portfolio strategy perspective is take that offline behavior and then see what it meant for digital delivery and ordering. And what we found was there was about a 20% gap in incidents from offline behavior walking into a store than what people were ordering to be delivered. We also found that they were planning their orders about a week to 10 days in advance as opposed to last minute purchases. So we had a couple things we need to do there. We need to improve visibility of the products in the right place and quantify that for our customers so that they would put us in the place that could ultimately result driving a cost per order down by about 20% and driving the volume for our beverages and the profit for our customers up by about 25% as we started to look at that consumer behavior.
So one interesting about your business is you're kind of indirectly marketing because you've got the Pizza Huts and the restaurants of the world that are partners with you. And if I get one wrong, I'm sorry, but so your job is to drive someone from not ordering water to ordering one of your soft drinks. Is that kind of where it comes in, or is it deeper than that?
No, we compete with the refrigerator that's already in the house. And but that's the time when they would order beverages is when they get choice for the family across all types of products. And we really had to prove to these customers, and I say it like our operators and distributors, what the propensity to purchase was. So when we looked at the type of data that we could collect on customers and map around the country, who's more likely to purchase from a Pizza Hut versus a Papa John's, and then what were the right products to personalize their experience. And that's what drove those results.
Gotcha. Ashley, speak a little bit about moving into the data area. I think we talked about your career earlier about going from analog to digital and moving to data experiences with your customers. Speak a little bit about Abnovation and what you guys do over there, because I think that'd be interesting to add on to how they've looked at predictive analytics.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you not familiar with Appnovation, we are digital partners. We work across industries, and kind of our new slogan is it's practical application with bold ambition. So we help our clients create digital strategies, and then we also help them build out digital assets. So we turn those strategies into websites, phone apps, what have you. And then my role is to ensure that we have the data collection, that data is going somewhere for our clients and being leveraged in such a way to drive their business forward in whatever that may mean to the client.
Gotcha. Action, you're with AT&T. You probably get, if I'm looking at this around, you probably get more data than just about anybody, because it's a whole different deal with you. Talk a little about how you know you're getting the right data, and then a little bit how you can deploy that data.
Oh, wow, John, right to the heart of it, huh? Yeah. So, it's a funny thing. You guys, I'm sure, have heard the phrase, the data says, like the data says. The data doesn't ever actually say anything. It's like when somebody says Twitter says or science says, it's not real. The data doesn't say anything. If anything, I would say you're more likely to be pushed in the wrong direction if you over rely on what you have in front of you. It is a lot more important in the very beginning of your journey to do some work to understand what measures actually matter. What actually drives your business is probably the first thing I would say people should think about. Then secondarily from that, beyond the measures that matter element, is inventorying and understanding all the sources of your data. Is it first party? Is it second? Is it third? Is it structured? Is it unstructured? And then after you do that, going through the exercise of figuring out what's critical. And what I mean by it's critical is most of the data you probably have access to isn't actually critical to go-to-market, to insights, to audience definition. And if it isn't critical, there's nothing wrong with it. I wouldn't necessarily say get rid of it, but you want to prioritize the stuff that's critical and rooted in the stuff that matters and drives your business.
Yeah, so that's interesting. And I'm trying to think, there's so much data out there. I work for a financial services company. We've got a lot of data. You've got more because you can get into text message and stuff that there's privacy laws. I know that. So let's don't talk about things we can't. But I guess talk a little about putting data into practice, because you get this data. Give an example of where you've pulled something and maybe put it into practice. This worked well. So someone listening and say, okay, that's a lot of theory. How do you put it into practice?
Yeah, so I'd say a couple of things on the practice side. Once you figured out a little bit more around, hey, these are the measures that matter, because no matter what you look at, there's going to be 1,000 versions of something. Once you figure out the measures that matter and you can actually connect, hey, if I'm looking at this particular variable, that's much more likely to drive sales or conversion or loyalty. Once you've disaggregated that way, the thing I find is the most useful way to get the whole organization, senior leadership, everybody on board to how commercially important this is to execute a test and learn to start. And the test and learns are really safe ways to take the assumptions and the challenges that you might have culturally in your organization around, but can you do anything with the data? And literally set up a test where you're saying, okay, let us try to understand the connection between the demand this person might have in this household and my differentiated ability to win that customer, drive an upgrade, drive an acquisition, do something like that in a test and learn. And when you deploy it that way in an actual environment where you have a pre and a post or a control or a test, you then can do that. It's something you can do and show and walk around the organization and say, listen, I got a 5% lift, or I got a 20% much more likelihood to drive a conversion. Now I understand better when I use propensity to buy, when I use demand definitions or audience definitions, that it's commercially feasible, and you get the whole organization excited about that. It's a lot more of a wind at your back scenario when you have that test and learn in your hand.
So I like test and learn. John, tell me this. So, and I'm thinking about your business. And so it's a B2B to C type, business to business to retailer. How do you collect your data, and then speak a little bit how you deploy it? Because it's a little different from getting an email from a consumer. Like you're looking at purchasing data or restaurant purchasing data, and then take from the consumer, and also home delivery, as you said, fighting with the refrigerator. Talk a little about how to collect the data and then how to deploy it properly, and maybe an example of that.
Yeah, I just want to add one comment to Afshin's, what he was talking about. Test and learn was a part of all the annual planning that we did. So we would challenge the brand teams to include a test and learn scenarios and assign a dollar risk of what that would be if they can't access the information, and that would tend to motivate partnership across the matrix organization to get buy-in that you need on an annual basis. So from collecting data, I think that we would take a lot of the syndicated data streams that we purchase and license, and we would try and map the trends of growth or decline from those against the custom research that we would have to go out and do on a regional basis. So the syndicated data would give us general category and industry types, and we were always trying to grow faster than the category. But in terms of deploying the data, you're talking about a whole lot of different audiences across the digital maturity curve. So some of that's going to require education and internal roadshows, and then some of it with good partners who are willing to share the purchase data in the B2C part of it, working on that, and even sharing and testing from a clean room perspective what else we could learn, what other data points or attribution that we could take advantage of.
Yeah, so speaking of attribution, Ashley, talk a little about how you guys find good attribution from the data you collect, and then talk a little about what you guys do to help deploy the data in a proper way. And I know that's theoretical, but like if you have an example, that's great. If not, you can talk about what you do with the data when you pull it for companies or yourself or whomever.
Yeah, absolutely. So a really common challenge that our clients face is connecting those data streams. So a lot of times the marketers don't have visibility into how they're actually driving sales. So that's the first place that we like to start with the clients, is ensuring that we're connecting all of that data so that we can understand the aggregate journey and then do that attribution modeling. So that's the first place that we like to start. And then from there, it's, how do you commercialize that? So we recently worked with a client and they had a purchase life cycle that was longer than they thought it should be. So from when they first engaged with a customer to when that purchase was made was 3 months, and they wanted to shorten that cycle. So what we did was we analyzed that customer experience and that customer journey. One of the ways that we did that was by looking at website behavior and how that could indicate a future purchase. So based on the model that we created, we identified 4 key actions that had that predictive ability. And from there, we baked out that customer experience by adding in an email. So we would automatically send them an email if they took that action. And then we would send them out to a field rep who would contact them by phone, because what was missing was our touch points during the consideration phase. And so by doing that, we ultimately decreased the average purchase cycle by 2 weeks, which was a great outcome for our clients. So it's models like that and things like that that we usually try to do that'll articulate where our opportunities are to bake out that customer experience, and to Ashton's point, quantify the material impact on the bottom line to the business. Because as you said, as soon as you have that, the wind is really at your back and the buy-in happens very quickly within the organization.
Yeah. So Afshin, I think she mentioned some of what you talked about earlier, but my question would be this is when you get your data, are you giving it to the marketing team to make decisions? Are you giving them direction with it? Is it going to the front line? Is it going to, AT&T is not, it's retail, but it's digital stores, it's ordering. There's so much, it's such a global company of network and all that stuff. Where does the data go when you you say, oh, these customers, there's a trend we see here, then how do you take it to actionable insights, I guess to say?
Yeah. I'm going to answer your question from the point of view of AT&T, but I just want to caution that every company's on a journey. And so what I'm going to describe is probably a little bit more sophisticated than everybody has access to right away, but it's a good point of reference to look at, which is we are currently continuing to undertake a fairly robust view of all of the data inventory that we have across the whole organization, and where that data sits, rationalizing where that data sits, and identifying all the data flows. And so that means data flows from customer into a view of total households of the universe. Those two different sets of data actually do sit in two different places. One of them is the environment where we have all the personal PII information for the customers and where we're engaged on a regular basis on the experience. And then another one is a data environment where it has the ability for us to run deep analytics, build models, put in a model repository, apply that to the extension of the total universe. Why is that important? There are some things that we might know and some sets of data we might have at the customer level. Those should be the people we know the most about. We should, hopefully everybody knows more about their customer than they do other folks. And between the layers of what's relevant, what's private, how do I ensure people's security, what's the data governance, you then might want to take that data, that information, that knowledge, that these people need this, these people want that, this is how I address it, this is what drives conversion, and apply it to the total universe of 100 million plus households. And when you do that, that needs to be in a separate environment. And you might want that to be an environment where your data scientists and analytics can go in there and run models, but then the data can go back because your marketers might not be coding in R, but they do want to have visibility to the entire movement of data and what's actually critical to them. So where the data sits depends on whether or not it needs some of this governance linked to privacy, whether it's has personal information or not, and then whether it's customer or not customer.
Gotcha. So I'm gonna throw a little curveball here because we've covered some of the stuff we've previously discussed on this. John Ross, tell me this: what's a mistake you see people make with data and analytics, or it can be one you've seen before? Because I want to be a live combo here. So what's a mistake you've seen, or something you'd say, don't do this?
Yeah, well, we would cannibalize our media by all going after the same acquisition, customers. And so we would have all the brands would be competing and buying against each other and actually driving the price up from a performance marketing standpoint or across the media purchase. So there needs to be a little bit of a detente before in a media planning perspective on an annual basis to say, this is the consumer we're going to go after in specific occasions. Because if you didn't do that, they're getting served. I'm competing with Starbucks, is competing with Mountain Dew, is competing with Pepsi, is competing with Aquafina for 18 to 30-year-olds. And that's just a waste. And so we figured out we had about 30% of our media was being wasted through those buys. And so we had to really work hard to be more moment and occasion based focused than we were just from a blast perspective. That's
an interesting. I almost wish we had someone from a motor vehicle company on here, because I've often wondered, like Corolla, Camry, and do you try to push the consumer to the next tiered car? Do you go from Camry to Lexus? Like, how do you push in brands? And you're having the same issue. Is it a Mountain Dew? Is it a Pepsi? Is it, who are you fighting against? And then you get cannibalization with your own brand. Actually, I'll ask you a similar question. Like, talk about a mistake you've seen, or kind of a theoretical mistake that some companies make when they get the data and they go, okay, we do this. Like, and cannibalization is a great example. What are some others that might be something worth somebody taking home from this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say one of the biggest mistakes we see our clients making is, I mentioned this the first time, is I call it Tabitha syndrome, where companies are taking on huge data initiatives where you're really doing a complete business transformation. These things take a lot of time. They take a lot of time, and you can't twinkle your nose and make all these things happen overnight. And so we always try to manage the expectations of how quickly these things can be stood up. We're working with a client on an initiative to integrate data and having debates on how we define a member. This is the level of minutia that you have to get into in order to connect your data and leverage it in such a way that's going to be helpful for your business. So that's the first thing I would say, is be realistic about how quickly you can stand up some of these data initiatives, because it's worth the wait once you get to the other side. Another thing I would mention is also, as Ashton said, the gaps. So a lot of times people think, you have so much data, everything must be there, but there's still gaps. And so when you first start trying to understand a business problem, I always try to look for the blind spots. So where are we seeing customers drop off on the journey? That's a great place to start. And then just doing analyses that help you fill in the gaps. So we had a client recently, it was an insurance company, and they were hitting their membership sign up goals, but they had a huge churn rate after 30 days. They were telling us, our customer service is rated extraordinarily highly. We don't know what's going on, that people are leaving us so quickly. So we did some social listening and found that thousands of customers were online complaining about how they couldn't connect to any customer service agents. So if it's an insurance company, you need information in a timely manner, and that's enough to get somebody to want to switch to one of your competitors. So when we communicated that back, of course, that they were shocked. But the reality was, when people were able to connect, they rated them highly, but oftentimes they weren't able to connect. So we often try to help our clients find those blind spots as well. So I would say that those are two of some of the most common mistakes that I see getting made in the market today.
Good stuff. And I like blind spots. That's where data a lot of times can tell you stuff that you might not see. Ashton, you got any thoughts on like big mistakes or blind spots, or where data has helped either someone in your career or even AT&T to like maybe do something or not do something that they should do?
Yeah, I think probably one of the mistakes that's probably the most important to think about, that is probably the easiest to start to make progress on, is approaching the data itself not as a treasure chest you go to find your next step, but starting with what the strategy is and the insights are. So doing insights work that helps you better translate your data is really important. So I'll give you a practical example. Oftentimes people will talk about a journey as if there is a journey. There is not a journey. There are many journeys. The journey for the shopper might not be the same journey for the usage of the product, which, by the way, might not be the same journey between a customer and an acquisition target. So there are different journeys that you could try and understand, trying to have a good sense for what you're trying to action on. So in the case of connectivity, for instance, if you think about connectivity broadly and step back from a narrow view of the business, you start to understand the relationship between some adjacent behaviors that maybe wouldn't be what your focus would be. For instance, you might go, okay, I'm in the business of delivering internet connectivity to people. But what you might find is the people who are the most likely to use that internet in the most intense way have other predictive markers. They are more likely to use IoT devices and smart home devices and things of that sort. Now you have markers that help you identify who those people are and target acquisition targets that are much more likely to be important to one type of demand versus another. And those are the type of insights that you need before you go dive in the data, rather than going in the data and saying, oh, this is interesting, what can I do with it? Does that make sense?
It does. And I think it's the chicken and egg thing. I mean, do you want to accomplish something, or do you want the data to drive what you want to accomplish? Like, I want to grow sales. We're going to do this. What's the data tell us? Or the data tells us this. Can we grow sales? I think it's how that works. So question for all y'all, because I'm going to go around the horn again with these things. If put yourself in the listeners or the conventioners, virtual conventioners audience right now, they're listening here. Give them what you would be, and this is going to be very vague and broad, but like, what would be your best tactical takeaway for using data in the customer experience? And I'll start with John, and then we'll go around there. So John, you try to answer that. A tactical takeaway that they could say, this is something we should do.
I think when I think about it from a .com or a web perspective, find the entrance and exit pages on your website. Find out where they're coming in, because it's not where you think, and where they, and to Ashley's point and to Ashton's point, where they're leaving from, and that shows you where you're not delivering to keep them on the journey.
So to that, I'm just gonna ask this random question: how important is bounce rate?
I think very important, because then you're getting to the heart of the problem that you need to solve. So.
Yeah. So you're saying use your data to see how people are exiting and entering your website. And then obviously I mentioned bounce rate, just like what they're doing, I guess, as they get on the site, what keeps them there. All right, Ashley, same type question. If there's one tactical takeaway you could give to the audience, give me something you do or just a thought you have, but what would it be?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's underutilizing the qualitative data. So like call center data, for example, when your customers are calling in, who's analyzing that data that you're capturing? And is that data actually being captured? That's just one example, but I feel like quantifying your qualitative data, especially from a customer experience perspective, is something that I believe is being totally underutilized by a lot of companies. And that's where you're really going to get the feedback on your product, on, you know, all your services, what have you. So that's an area that we're hyper focused on, especially at scale. So we're thinking through how we can create a product that will automate understanding that type of data. So that's something we're currently focused on at Appnovation. And I would recommend to other businesses as well.
Yeah, and so a question to that is, and this could take a year conversation, but how do you ensure the data is clean and can match up? Like, I know when we were looking at pulling data, have people entered their phone numbers with brackets or parentheses and dots to pull the data and then put it in a form, or are they entering their address with their zip code in a different spot? You know, how do you ensure you've got the data clean? And I guess that's just part of what y'all do, and what companies do is they help cleanse it to make sure it's actionable data.
Yeah, you have to clean the data, and then you have people QAing the data. I mean, that's a little bit more technical, you know, than what I would normally do. Usually I get the data after it's been cleaned so that I can analyze it. So perhaps one of the other panelists knows a little bit more about those processes. But yeah, certainly something that you need to ensure before you analyze the data. Otherwise, you know, the famous garbage in, garbage out. So definitely an important part of the process.
Yeah. And Action, tactical takeaway that you could leave with somebody watching that says, this guy from AT&T knew this, and so I'm going to do it now, or this is something we should pay attention to.
Yeah, I would think about, I think a very helpful framework is ignore the data first. Answer the following question, or at least ask the following question. What are the points of decision making for the people you're trying to target, and where are they most receptive to being influenced? Start with that. Because if you can map out, these are the places where do I come or not come? When I come, do I stay or not stay? When I stay, do I do or not do? When I do, does it drive me to buy or not buy, or recommend or not recommend? What is that for your particular set of offerings? And along those, what are those places? Where are they most receptive? If you know that clarifies the jungle becomes a very pristine garden at that point, where you can go in and say, okay, here's the places where I'm missing data, where I'm missing the ability to connect the data to the decision, where I'm missing the opportunity that's in front of me based on the tools that I have. That's what I would say.
Gotcha. Now that's good stuff. So to that, we've got a couple questions, at least in the chat, because I said I would get to those since we've got just a little bit of time left. An anonymous person said, and this is, again, vague and broad, what is your dream data analytics system? And I don't even know how you, like, what are you trying to do? Is it a CRM? Is it MCIF? Is it just a platform? So we'll start Action since we just finished with you. What would be your dream system? And it's probably not invented yet. You probably have to invent it.
Yeah.
What would be your dream system?
Yeah. It's, there are different important functions you need to think about. You need to think about how you're receiving the data and where you're warehousing it. That warehousing, you might want to be able to layer in, and there's a lot of tools to warehouse. You could warehouse in Snowflake, you could warehouse in a lot of different tools. You might think about how to deploy analytics in it, and give a backdoor to your data science people to go in and wrangle that data. And there's a ton of tools there too, whether you're dealing in Databricks, you're dealing in Palantir, whatever tool you happen to be in. I guess that for me, the main thought for that question is, what are the aspects of identifying, housing, manipulating, structuring, engineering, and deploying the data that you actually need to do first? Then based off of that, there are different tools for each one of those. So there isn't really a tool. There are sets of them.
John, what are your thoughts on the perfect system to run your data analytics?
I'm nowhere near as intelligent as Action is. I would say the visual storytelling of the data is extremely important. So you've got to be able to put this into some sort of output like a Tableau even 5 years ago, we could put a screen up in the marketing floor at PepsiCo and show in real time how the brands were performing, to give the emerging brands some credit that they were due for the progress that they were making, and see how that compares to the legacy brands. So I think the visual storytelling output of that someone can get who's a non-digital, non-marketer, non-CX person, and they can digest that, I think is extremely important. Otherwise, giving them self-service tools to go in and mess around with, you're not going to get the kind of commitment that you need to get the resources and fund and invest in where you are in the journey.
That's a good one too, is being able to visualize the data to put it to use. Ashley, I'll let you have the closing comment on this this question.
Yeah, absolutely. So very similar to kind of what John was saying, customization. So I like things that I can completely customize what the visual is going to look like, what the colors are going to be, because a lot of what I'm producing is going out to brands. So it needs to have the right look and feel, and I need to be able to do very, very cool visualization. So I like a clean, slate. Tableau is a great example of a tool that gives you that level of functionality. But those are the most important attributes that I think of when I think about how I'm communicating out the analytics and how I'm analyzing the data itself.
Awesome stuff. Well, guys, we bumped up on our time. I told you it would go fast. I think we got some good answers. We went through some theory, we went through some tactics, and we answered a question or two and talked about a mistake that we see in the marketplace of digital customer service and experience. So anyway, I appreciate y'all being on here. John Afshin and Ashley, have a great day. If you need them, go on the chat or the meeting marketplace type deal over there on your screen, and connect with them if you have any questions. Otherwise, thank y'all so much for being here, and we're going to move on to our next speaker.